And at the strategic level, he's watching as Ukraine is abandoned by Trump. And leaving aside the fact I think that's disgraceful, and I expect most of us do, but the brutal reality is it will have a serious impact. So I don't know whether Putin will come to the negotiating table, but my instinct is I doubt it for a while.
Now, in another blow to Ukraine's military, the American company Maxar yesterday cut off Ukraine's access to its satellite imagery. The satellite images are crucial to tracking the movements of Russian troops, assets, and damage to key infrastructure following Russian air strikes. Now, welcome to the show, Major General Tim Cross, a former British Army officer and military logistics expert. General, thank you so much for giving us your time. Welcome.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
How significant is this lack of access to that satellite imagery? Logistically, how valuable is that to the Ukrainian army?
Well, in and of itself, it's very valuable. But most importantly, you've got to link it in with all the other things that have been going on, where President Trump has decided not to give them access to intelligence and to materiel support, stopped all the the equipment and program and weapons and so on. When we think of Ukraine and the soldiers fighting at the front, obviously that's the sort of first image that people have when it comes to a campaign like this. And there's tough fighting and a lot of serious casualties and so on. But that's the tactical level. Any campaign, any war is won at what we call the operational level, having a strategic understanding of what it is we're trying to achieve. In this case, obviously, Ukraine trying to keep Russia out. But the campaign planning is done at the operational level. It's above the tactics. It's a combination of pulling together the logistics that you need. And professionals do realize that, ultimately you've got to be able to sustain this fight for as long as possible. But it's also about the intelligence, the satellite pictures, what we call the intelligence preparation of the battlefield. And these satellite images enable you to see deep into Russia, see where they're pulling together their forces for preparing offensives, see where the logistics is being stored, lines of communication, reinforcements being brought forward, and so on. And then in addition to that, President Trump has been pulling the secure communications that Ukraine had. So, they're going to struggle to keep their own intelligence away from the Russians. So it's a combination of these things. And collectively, clearly it is very serious. And there's no doubt that if this goes on much longer, Ukraine at the tactical level will begin to suffer quite seriously.
I mean, can Ukraine continue to hold off the Russian forces with that withdrawal of the satellite images, that secure communication capabilities, and of course the withdrawal of intelligence?
Yeah, I mean, those are the things, obviously, I've just been referring to. And the answer to that question is in one sense, yes, because it's not just about stuff and understanding doctrine. It's about the determination to fight and win on a battlefield. It's what we in the British Army call the moral component of fighting power. And the Ukrainians have displayed an extraordinary moral component over the last 2 or 3 years. So, the guys at the front will be fighting hard in order to hold on to the ground they've got. But what we're beginning to see, and I suspect we could see this happening, over the next few days, couple of weeks maybe, is the salient inside Russia, the Kursk salient. The Russians will be able to bring up forces which Ukraine won't be able to see because they haven't got this satellite stuff. They won't be able to pick it up over the communication systems. So the Ukrainian forces at the front could find themselves being outflanked and enveloped. And Russia had been making relatively small gains at the front line over the last 2 or 3 weeks. But the pressure, if Putin's got any sense at all, and sadly I think his military commanders have at least some sense, notwithstanding how badly they fought this campaign, they will be putting a lot of pressure on that front line, trying to break through, encircle that Kursk salient and make ground in preparation, if nothing else, if they decide to go to the negotiating table. Although why Putin would go at the moment, is anybody's guess as NATO implodes and he makes these advances on the front line. So yeah, it'll make a big difference. Ukraine could hold out, and I think they probably will for a while. But if this goes on much longer, I fear that they will not be able to hold the line for much longer.
So, from your point of view, what I'm gathering, General, this is a complete disincentive for Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table. I mean, he's going to look at his situation. Effectively, Ukraine has had one of their arms tied behind their back and sent out to the battlefield. Why should Vladimir Putin sit down and negotiate peace?
Well, it's a good question. And it's something I've been saying, frankly, for the last, few days. From the minute that Zelensky was ambushed in the White House, and I'm quite clear in my own mind that he was ambushed, The Russians and Putin in particular will have been sitting back and watching and, rubbing their hands together with glee. As I said earlier, NATO, it's not imploding. I don't think America's going to lead NATO, but NATO is not in a good place at the moment. And clearly, with America pulling all of this stuff we've been talking about, I just can't see an incentive for Putin to go to the negotiating table. Now, there may be some things going on in the background. We know that Trump says he's been talking to Putin. But if he thinks Putin is going to hold the line and do whatever he's been talking about and stay true to anything he's agreed so far, I think Trump could find himself pretty disappointed because Putin is in a very strong position. As I say, he's making grounds at the tactical level. At the operational level, he's in a much better strategic position now than he was. And at the strategic level, he's watching as Ukraine is abandoned by Trump. And leaving aside the fact I think that's disgraceful, and I expect most of us do, that the brutal reality is it will have a serious impact. So I don't know whether Putin will come to the negotiating table, but my instinct is I doubt it for a while.
Just briefly, General, with the continued withdrawal of that US support, is this something that this coalition of the willing, as Sir Keir Starmer puts it, can fill the gap? I appreciate it can't be done immediately, but in the long run, can you see that security of Ukraine being maintained by that coalition of the willing, France, Germany, the UK?
Yeah, clearly it depends on what you mean by the long run, or what we all mean by the long run. In the short term, the answer is no. And the increase in British defence spending is pretty minimal, 0.2%. Germany, of course, is talking about ramping it up. But we're not moving quickly on this. The Europeans have been in my view, very poor in supporting Zelensky, not just to enable him to hold, but to enable him to win on the battlefield. We've held back in all sorts of ways we haven't got time to go into. But if Europe now says, yes, we will pick up the mantle and fill this gap, it is doable, but it will take months for them to fill the gap. And Zelensky has not got months, in my view.
Okay. Major General Tim Cross, thank you for giving us your time.
I think we're doing very well with Russia. But right now they're bombing the hell out of Ukraine. And I'm finding it more difficult, frankly, to deal with Ukraine. And they don't have the cards. They don't have the cards. As you know, we're meeting in Saudi Arabia on sometime next week, early. And we're talking, I find that in terms of getting a final settlement, it may be easier dealing with Russia, which is surprising because they have all the cards. I mean, they're bombing the hell out of them right now. And I put a statement in, a very strong statement. Can't do that. Can't do that.
Mr. President,
We're trying to help them. And Ukraine has to get on the ball and get a job done. Michael, could you come up here? I see Michael back there.
under President Trump's leadership.
I think both parties want to settle. I think if I wasn't president, this war would have had no chance of settlement, zero chance. But I think we're going to get it settled and stopped. We got to stop. They're losing on average 2,000 soldiers a week. That's a lot of soldiers. Do you agree, Peter?